Hello, everybody. I'm Mel Underbaki, the Deputy Executive Director of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. Today, our whole country is dealing with a pandemic that is disrupting lives and causing a lot of hardship. And this situation is far, far worse in our prisons. This is our 12th webinar today, and we'll be looking at this situation in our federal prisons. We'll be hearing about conditions and some of the ways that the prisoners are dealing with it, both from prisoners and from family members. We'll also be hearing about efforts to deal with the situation. Now, we're very honored today to have with us Maria Morris. Maria is a senior staff attorney with the ACLU's National Prison Project, where she litigates on behalf of people incarcerated throughout the country. She has extensive experience in the field. She led the successful litigation against the Alabama Department of Corrections for its failure to provide constitutionally adequate mental health care and accommodations for persons with disabilities. She is also a member of the overcrowding trial team in Brown versus Plata. And prior to joining the ACLU, Maria was a supervising staff attorney at the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we're also happy to have Leila Yagi with us today. Leila is a longtime friend. She's a poet, and she has a son who is currently serving a 31-year sentence in a federal prison. And two other members of the CCF team are also here. Kathy Manley, the CCF legal director, and Ashley Young, the prisoner and family coordinator. At the end of the presentations, if you have any questions, we'll try to answer them. So submit them as they come up to you, and either on live stream, the Facebook live stream, or if you're on Zoom, submit them on chat. And I would like to start with Maria. Could you tell us a little more about yourself and the National Prison Project?
Sure. So as she said, my name is Maria Morris, and I'm actually fairly new to the National Prison Project at the ACLU. I joined them in February, but I've been working on prison litigation for about 15 years now. And I think it's critically important to some of the most basic human rights issues in our country. So that's very much what drives me. The National Prison Project works on prisoners' rights issues throughout the country. We have cases in a number of states, and we are working on a variety of cases in the federal system now relating to COVID, as well as in prisons and jails throughout the country.
Okay, thank you. And are you been looking at some of the conditions that prisoners are facing, or what types of issues are you looking at?
With regard to COVID specifically? Or okay, with regard to COVID, we're looking at conditions, but also just the need to get people out, the need to make the housing and the housing within prisons less densely populated. Most of the cases we've brought have sought a combination of actual releases from prison, whether under something like a compassionate release, where the person is in fact being let out from their sentence, or something like transfer to home confinement, where they can serve out some or all of the remainder of their sentence at home, essentially under home arrest. We're looking at those issues. We're also looking at what needs to be done within the prisons to enable people to be safer, even if they are still within a prison. So what kinds of hygiene, what kinds of disinfection, mask usage, a lot of issues around testing and quarantine or isolation.
What are you finding with the conditions, particularly the federal prisons? That's where our prisoners are.
Yeah, they're bad. It would be fair to say that they're bad. And I'll say that the prison that I've been most aware of, the involved in like doing the investigation, and so I know that most is FCC Butner in North Carolina. So what we're hearing is that in most prisons, people can't maintain anything like a distance from each other. You've got people who are living in open bay units. In the federal system, it's very often in what they call cubicles. And so you've got 2 or 3 people in a cubicle that is 8 by 11 maybe, and then that cubicle is right next to another cubicle and has cubicles all around it, and they're not real walls, so the air is going back and forth. So each individual is likely to be sleeping within 6 feet of 3 or 4 or 5 other people. They have to share bathrooms, and bathrooms are going to generally be, maybe 8 sinks, 4 sinks for 50 or 100 people. Toilets right next to each other, showers right next to each other. So people are going to be like constantly in very close proximity to a large number of other people. In a lot of the federal prisons, there was, as COVID became a bigger issue, they did some degree of lockdown, and one of the things that often meant was bringing meals to housing units. But then you've just got 50 or 100 or 200 people lining up for a meal 3 times a day in their housing unit. Similarly with pill call. And also for things like using the phone or using computers. They're going to be lining up while they wait to use them, and they're going to be right next to each other when they're actually using them. For people who are housed in celled housing, often they're not by themselves in their cell. You might have a cell of 2 people or 4 people or 3 people, and you're not going to be able to maintain any distance from those people. Also, you're very likely to, everybody on the unit is likely to be let out of their cell at the same time, and there's going to be the same, everybody's going to be rushing for the same resources, for the phone, for the ice machine, for the hot water dispenser, for the shower, all of the things. So you're going to be bringing people out from their cells, going immediately to places where they're going to be right next to other people again. So there's no ability to do the social distancing that's so critical. Masks seem to be available. It seems like there's a little information about the way people are supposed to wear masks. And I think probably the way many of the people on this call have seen out in the community, a lot of people don't wear their masks correctly. And there's no enforcement of that. It wasn't actually a federal facility, but I was on a virtual monitoring tour of a prison, and I saw nurses with their masks down below their nose. So there's just a lot of that not being done accurately, and there's no information being given to anybody about what you need to do in order to wear the mask effectively. There are a lot of issues with having enough soap. Often soap is, if it's on this, it might be a bar on the sink, or it might be a dispenser, but they run out and they don't get filled up immediately. So you can't wash your hand as much as you need to. And there's basically no willingness to provide hand sanitizer because of the alcohol content. There's also issues around cleaning of common areas and commonly touched surfaces. The CDC recommends that in prisons, commonly touched surfaces, so that's, sinks, toilet handles, doorknobs, tables, phones, all these things should be cleaned multiple times a day. Some of them get cleaned on a daily basis. Like generally, a bathroom will get cleaned on a daily basis, but it's not getting cleaned multiple times a day. And you've got, again, 100 or 200 men using the same facilities and going and touching. And so they're able to pick up the virus from those surfaces. And then there are other surfaces that just aren't getting washed. I've been doing investigations, and when I ask people, do the ice, where they get ice, does that get cleaned? And they pretty much laugh at me when I ask them that question, just because that's so far out of the realm of what is happening. I think one of the big problems that we've seen is the way testing is being done. In most facilities in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, there's very little testing happening. There may be testing, for example, if a person has to go out to a hospital for whatever reason, COVID related or not, the hospital is likely to require that they get tested before they come into the hospital. So you're likely to get a test then. If a person is showing COVID signs and they just collapse, maybe they'll get tested, maybe they won't. But one of the things that you definitely see is that the people who live right around them, they won't get tested. They're not even likely to be screened for symptoms, which means that as long as they're not doing testing and quarantining and isolation for the people who are around, the people who clearly have the illness, you're going to be having outbreaks. In a couple places, they've done widespread testing, either in a particular housing unit or in a particular facility. And when they've gotten to the point of doing that, they've found very high numbers of people having COVID-19, often upwards of 50%.
Wow.
And then one of the other problematic conditions with regard to testing is that when they do get around to doing sort of widespread testing, what we hear is that it takes a long time to get the results back. And it may be that they have some of the results back before they have all of the results back, and they don't give anybody the results until they have all the results back. They did some testing at Butner in one particular facility that seemed to be having an outbreak. And it took 10 days to get the results back for everybody. And when they did, it was well over 50% positive. And there was and they then divided people up by whether or not they were negative or positive. But for several days after that division, they were still identifying people who were positive within the supposedly negative housing units. And some of that was due to, they misread the test. And some of that was due to people developed symptoms, possibly because they caught the virus during that 10-day gap between when the tests were taken and when the results were given. The other things that we've heard about a lot are that when people get quarantined or isolated, it's very often in segregation units. And so it is viewed very much as a punitive kind of placement, and from all that we've heard, it's not, it is punitive isolation. And so one of the things that does is discourages people from acknowledging that they're having symptoms. If they are afraid or don't want to go to segregation, then they try not to let anybody know that they're sick, which means that they're in the housing unit with the other people, getting the other people sick. So it's a very serious problem. In addition to, once they're sick, they need to be cared for. And one of the things we're seeing very much in the Bureau of Prisons is that people who are getting sick are not being cared for. They're either if an outbreak is not terribly widespread, they're likely to be put into a segregation, and then they're just left there they get temperature checks and vital signs checks, but that's the medical care that they're getting until it either passes and they are able to return to the general population, or they get worse and they ultimately have to be taken to a hospital. And then for people in places where there's more of a widespread outbreak, where they essentially will establish a whole housing unit of people who are sick, it's essentially the same thing, that people they're getting their vital signs checked, and that's it. And if they're so you have a whole bunch of people who are at different levels of being sick in a room, and they're basically left to care for each other. So the people who are a little bit less sick are helping the people who are more sick. Again, until it passes or somebody goes to the hospital. And so that's sort of the situation that we found, and people are really afraid.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you very much for that overview of it. So as you said, the situation is very bad for the prisoners, and it's also bad for the families, because in their efforts to control the pandemic, most of the prisons have cut off visitation. I think all the federal prisons have, am I right there? And so some of the places have been in lockdown for months, and this makes telephone more difficult because the family members, they don't have, they're in their cells and they can't use their phone there. So I want to go on to Layla now. I said her son was the victim of a preemptive prosecution. His conviction was, and I'm quoting, conspiring to provide material support to an unknown terrorist organization at an unknown time in an unspecified place. So in other words, Zia did not do anything, but maybe he will in the future. Okay, there was no terrorism, but he was sentenced to 31 years. I hope I'm not frozen while I'm having a thunderstorm here. Okay, good. Yeah. And so I visited Zia a number of times, and he's a really nice person. But we have Layla here, who is his mother. And so Layla, could you tell us a little more about Zia and what kind of a person he is, maybe what sort of conditions he's in now? Let's see, I think you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? I don't know if I can.
I'm unmuted.
Okay, good.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I said Ziad is a very nice young man. Right now he's in Raybrook, New York. The conditions over there is right now that they are on lockdown and they have restrictions. So of course, no visitors. They're not allowed to have any family members or any visitors at all. And he said that I guess they're only allowed an hour or two right now to do like call if you need to call or use a phone or the internet, to email me or any of his friends. But basically, they are on lockdown. Um, yeah. Do you want me to talk about his case?
Yeah, just wait, is he in lockdown in a cell by himself, or is he,
Not the whole prison is in lockdown, on lockdown.
I mean,
So
does he have a cellmate? I guess that's what I'm asking. Or is he in
I
solitary
did not
confinement?
ask. He called.
Okay.
He calls
Mhm.
like once a month, and
Okay, once a month. Yeah.
communication is very little between me and
Yeah.
him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it's very sad because I really, I'm very worried about him all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, I'm depressed all the time. I don't stop
Yeah.
thinking about him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I couldn't see him last year because of my financial situation, and then when COVID happened, the virus, they stopped all visitation. So now it's 2 years I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him in 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk to him, is he holding up okay in this with the lockdown, or does he the
Yeah, I
different?
mean, he doesn't really express his feelings because he has always been protective of me. So he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want me to worry. So he thinks like if he doesn't tell me his feelings, then I'm not going to worry. I'm going to worry regardless. Always been protective of me.
Oh,
So
hold on a second
he
here.
doesn't want
So
me to
hold on
worry.
a
He
second.
thinks like if he doesn't.
Why? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I said, yeah, he's always been protective of me. So he doesn't tell me his feelings. He doesn't express his feelings because he's worried that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to worry about him more. But I'm always worried either way, whether, he tells me what's going on or not, because
Mm-hmm.
he's in prison.
Mm-hmm. And how are you dealing with this? It's got to be very hard for you.
It's very, very, very hard. It's been 11
Mm-hmm.
years. And
Yeah.
sorry. And when that your son is innocent and he hasn't done anything, you keep asking, why is this happening? Um, why is this country doing this to us? I
Mm-hmm.
was born in Montana. I'm mixed. My dad is Palestinian American and my mom is white American. And we go back and forth to Jordan. We have dual citizenship. So all our lives we've been going back and forth to Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And Ziad, I really did not, he really did not see Jordan since he was probably 2. So he wanted to see when he grew up, he wanted to see Jordan, and he wanted to know the rest of his family members from his dad's side, because like all my family and even his dad's family, we have dual citizenship, so we go back and forth. But because we are divorced, he wanted to know, how his paternal grandmother looks, and he wanted to know her before she died, because she was getting old and she was getting sick, and he had heard that she got sick. So when he went there, of course, they misconstrued everything as, that he went there to do something else. Where in fact,
Yeah.
they really look at things, they would know, that he went there to get married, because he went there to get married and to learn Arabic and to visit his grandmother and his paternal side of the family. So I couldn't understand, why the FBI
Mm-hmm.
concocted all these stories. The only thing that when I was reading a lot is because they make money out of when they put someone in prison, they make money out of that. They get money from the government to say that this is, there are some terrorists in the United States,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we need to take care of them. So they take care of them by putting innocent people in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I could share pictures um, of Ziad when they said, sorry, I don't know why I'm not able to share though. I thought I was the host.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not the technical person. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a thing you share, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not letting me share the pictures. Okay,
Okay.
if somebody could do that, where I could share his pictures, because he's
Okay,
at the
here we go.
beach. Hmm. No, I don't know what's going on.
Hmm. I don't either. It says you started screen sharing, but I don't see any pictures.
Okay,
So, hmm.
hold on. So they said that one of the words that are used for jihad, because they claim that he's going overseas to do jihad. One of
Mm-hmm.
the words that were used was that. Can you see this picture?
Yes, yes.
Okay. That one of the words that were used. This is Ziad. That was the beach. Going to the beach meant that he's gonna go do jihad. So you could see that Ziad, he went to Jordan and then he went to Egypt because his
Mm-hmm.
friend. He went with his friend, as his friend is from Egypt. You could see that, this picture where he's at the beach. So I don't see where he's doing anything wrong, but being a young man of 18 or 19. And
Mm-hmm.
11 years, being in jail for something that he didn't do is like really outrageous. Um, my grandmother, when I was a child, she used to always say that there are a lot of people who are innocent who are in jail, and I never understood that. And then she would pray for them. She would pray for these innocent people. And I never could understand why she was saying that as a child. But when I grew up and, I saw, of course, that there are a lot of innocent people in prison, as you see, especially with colored people, people of color. So here you see Ziad, you know, at the beach, and he's not doing anything wrong. So um, I don't understand.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. There are a lot of innocent people in the prisons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's Ziad as a
Oh,
baby.
yeah.
I'm not sure if you see
Mm-hmm.
that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're in a very difficult situation. The other thing, I was hoping you would bring one of your poems with you to read. Do you have one you could read to everybody? But Layla is a very good poet, so I think that's how you kind of do that for coping, don't you, to some extent?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I
Are
can,
you willing to read something?
yeah. Um, so I said, "What has changed" is the title of my poem. They
Mm-hmm.
say COVID has changed so many things. What has changed for me? My son still lies between the barren walls of a jail, in faraway chambers, hidden between the Adirondacks and dim lights. The many lakes that form from prisoners' tears, the thick fog that accumulates from their sighs, many asking why. The sun rises lazily in the morning between purple and blue clouds, covering its face with its rays, wishing the night to come early to relieve it from witnessing the injustices done to some innocent men. What has COVID done but confine him between more rules, more layers of darkness, entangled rules like a woman's hair in the unruly wind? The snow falls there even in June, leaving marks of footsteps of innocent gazelles eaten by grizzly bears. Here at home, the sun rises or doesn't, nothing matters. The curtains are closed anyhow. They cling tightly to the sweat of the windows, begging to be left alone. At night, the owl moans and hoots, the crows fly away, the angels leave. Last night, the sky was pouring buckets of tears. The eyes of angels were fading away. The rain kept pounding on your boots. They stole them though. They envied my love for you. Their mothers didn't love them though, so they made sure to take your boots. They made sure to take you before that. They dropped their masks on the way, on the sidewalk. Every time I pass them, I see the anger, hate, and bigotry that's left like an iron stain on them, burning every leaf that falls from the trees, charring the grass and the colonies of ants. I never could understand hate and how much it takes away from a being, peeling away their layers of skin, exposing their rotten black hearts with dark red and yellow stripes.
Thank you, Layla. That's very powerful, as usual. Thank you very much. Just reminder to people, if you have any questions, to submit them, and we'll get to the end. And also, just a heads up, we hope to have Layla back on in the future weeks, do more this case in more detail. So, and I want to give some voice to a couple of other prisoners now. And one of them is Wally. He has been in a communications management unit at Terre Haute for the last 11 years. These communication management units, or CMUs, were majority Muslim prisoners, and they were already very harsh places of confinement even before the pandemic. For example, they were never allowed contact visits with their families when they came, or anybody else. There's many other restrictions too, not many phone calls, etc. But since the pandemic, they've been on lockdown, and that'd be several months now, I believe. And they get maybe 2 hours out a day. And then Terre Haute is where the location of the federal executions that just restarted recently. The week when there were 3 executions, they were in lockdown the whole week, and they had 2 hours out in that whole entire week. And that makes your phone calls difficult because you're never out of your cell. Families are worrying. It's just other things I've heard about that particular prison is that they don't have air conditioning. And they can buy a small fan if they have $30 to pay for it. And the water is often rusty. And they can buy bottled water, again, they have to pay for it. So one way Wally deals with this is through his art. So I am also going to attempt to screen share and show you just a few of his oil paintings. Yeah, let's see now. Let's see it start. I'm not sure, I've never done this before, so bear with me. Oh, maybe I don't know how to do it. Okay, wait a minute. One system preferences. Okay. Okay, are you seeing his painting now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is one of my favorites of his paintings. And again, he says he uses the paintings that take him out of his cell.
We can't see it. We can't see it.
You didn't see the first one?
No, we can't see anything.
Oh, can you see? Do you see this?
Did you go to share screen?
I thought I did that. Okay, let me try it again.
Yeah.
Did it? And it did take me back where it was. Maybe we'll better do this.
To share screen.
Doing it again. You succeeded, so let me try. Let's see. Okay, are you seeing it now?
Mm-mm.
No?
Maybe somebody has to enable something so you can be able to share.
Yeah, is there somebody?
Yeah.
Maybe wait just a minute and see if we can. Let's try. Desktop on.
Can you put it up just like that?
Okay, my sheet, you don't have a shared screen, all right? Okay. I may give up and go on. Learn how to, huh?
Put it up like that. Maybe you can
Like,
see. Put it in front of you.
Oh, it's in my computer. Can't do that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a big painting. This is a photograph of the painting. Yeah,
That's nice.
it's a big one. So, Okay, well, these are beautiful paintings. Let me just go on record as saying that they're flowers, and he's a very good artist. The one is a snow scene in the mountains, and I wish I'll try to learn more about sharing by in the future. So, and then, okay, another thing that this person does, he's quite talented. He's also a writer and he is a poet. And I asked Ashley, our prisoner and family coordinator, if she would come on and read a couple of the poems that Wally sent us. So Ashley, if you're here, can you do that now?
Yeah, sure. And I'm very happy to read this poem. I have one that's called A Letter from Grandpa. I write you in English, since all languages are equal to you at this age. Your 2-hour-old face is that of a sage. Nicely wrapped in your blanket and hat, a miracle brought your picture down here. 1,000 fathoms below, my diving bell heavy and tight on my head, my feet planted at seabed. My waist weighted down with lead. My clumsy hand picked it up close. Please, my grandson, teach me how you made it against all odds. Was it worth it? Is it any better out there? Down here, above me all are knees, mechanical ones that do not hear. They worship the clock. From it, tiny second leaks after tiny second. Tick, tick, tick. I've been through billions of them and need millions still. But no, I am not standing still. I am moving through the muck, searching for the exit sign and for luck. Your face calmly calling me home. Grandson, please don't grow up too fast.
Thank you. Did you want to read the other one, or if we move on to another prisoner?
Yeah, I think that's the only one I have of Wally's.
Okay. And I think I sent you on the Samuel wrote since the pandemic started, and that's called Corona.
Yes. Okay, so this is Samuel Baptiste, entitled Corona. Corona. Some love it, some hate it. Others simply don't get it. Corona. First a cell and now a mask. They speak of isolation as if solitary didn't exist until Corona. You can drink it or you can catch it. Car swerves, headlights, and pole, breathalyzer evidence. Some are in prison because of Corona. What an awful name, social distancing, as if we're not already far from society. 6 feet, step back, legs spread. Corona. I see guards walking with hand sanitizers and an environment rife with bacteria. Passing it out to prisoners is not justified at all, at least not according to the protocols of Corona. A sentence on top of a jail sentence. I no longer receive visitations due to Corona. I'm locked down longer in my cell due to Corona. The stress and anxiety of prison multiplies due to Corona. I wear a mask just to read my mail due to Corona. Maybe I die in prison. The sound of a cough or sneeze is more terrifying than the guard's footsteps or keys due to Corona.
Thank you, Ashley. Very nice job with that. And I'd like to go back to Maria for just a minute. I understand there are some lawsuits now that you are the method you're using now. Can you tell us anything about them and what you're hoping to accomplish?
So we're hoping that we're hoping to push the courts to grant people release to home confinement or just straight out release. And if not that, then to provide for better conditions within the facilities, and particularly better testing and quarantine and isolation practices.
Yeah. Are you having success, or is it at the beginning stages, or what?
We have not had a lot of success.
But you're
We're
not giving up, though.
We are not giving up. The courts A couple courts have said that people should be released. Unfortunately, most where those have then been appealed by the federal government, the appellate courts have not agreed that people should be released. I think though it is accurate, and there have been a couple cases where there's one prison, FCI Danbury, where which is not an ACLU case, but there was an initial order to start releasing people, and the government did not appeal, and they're working through how to get that process going.
Okay.
And they have actually released quite a number of people from that particular facility. Otherwise, it has not been as effective. But I do think it would be fair to say that simply having lawsuits puts a good bit of pressure on the Bureau of Prisons to do things better.
I agree 100%. Yeah. So we thank you all for doing that. Yeah. So, and then to last, I'd like to move to our legal director, Kathy, who can to sort of do an update about our coronavirus prisoner release project and maybe explain a little bit of what it is in case people haven't heard of it. So, Kathy.
All right, thanks, Mel. I was really glad to hear from Maria, and I may be contacting you at some point with some questions about some prison condition issues in the future. But I think even if the lawsuits so far haven't been successful at getting large numbers of people released, I think in some cases they've resulted in safer conditions in some of the prisons, and also have gotten information out of them through the discovery process, which has been helpful. What we're doing, we in CCF advocate for and sometimes occasionally represent about 200 people that are in the federal prisons. We know that under the First Step Act, ever since 2019, we could file for compassionate release for any extraordinary and compelling reason. And a few cases were granted in 2019 before the pandemic, based on usually on medical conditions. Now, risking death from a pandemic, especially if you're really vulnerable to extra complications or death, that is an extraordinary and compelling reason. So that's why judges have been releasing some people from prison, federal prison, if they are particularly vulnerable to the virus. But often the motions are denied because the judge finds that regardless of the risk to the person, they say the case was too serious. And this happens a lot in cases like the ones we deal with, so-called terrorism cases, even though we know that the people we advocate for are not real terrorists and have not committed any violent acts. Judges are still very reluctant to grant release, but we've been trying and we've had some success. We put together a list of people who were vulnerable to the virus because of their age or their underlying medical conditions, and we started working on compassionate release motions. Now, our people also, I should note, are not eligible for home confinement from the Bureau of Prisons itself, because of the nature of their convictions. Having material support convictions, for example, makes them not eligible for home confinement. So the only way they can get released during the pandemic really is through compassionate release by a judge. So we filed 8 compassionate release motions so far, twice for the same person, and we assisted with 3 others. 4 of them were unfortunately denied, including one for Wally, the poet you just heard from, and the artist that you unfortunately didn't get to see his beautiful paintings. One was granted, that was excellent, for Sami Hassoun. We did a webinar with Amit Gupta, the attorney that wrote that motion. Unfortunately, Sami's now in immigration detention still in Batavia waiting to be deported. Fortunately, there was just a lawsuit against Batavia by the New York Civil Liberties Union, which is apparently resulting in safer conditions there, at least to protect him from the virus, because he's definitely vulnerable. 4 of our motions right now are awaiting decision, and we're working on preparing 3 more, and there's some others that we're evaluating. Now, this virus is a real serious threat, as you know. Though most people recover okay, many do not. One of the people we advocate for, Muhammad Yusuf, as you may have heard, died of COVID-19, and that was horrendous because he was just left to die in a cell. He was never taken to a hospital. The other inmates around him were banging and screaming for guards when he was gasping for breath, and they just ignored it, and he just died. And it was, hopefully there'll be a lawsuit about that. Another of our people, Ibrahim Elgabrowni, he contracted the virus pretty early on in the pandemic, and he's been on a ventilator since April. And it seems like there's almost no hope for him, but we're praying for a miracle. A few more of our folks have also tested positive, including Mufid Abdul Qadir of the Holy Land 5 case. There are attorneys from the Muslim Legal Fund of America who filed a motion for him after he tested positive, and we helped generate a lot of letters in support of that motion. The motion's still pending. And we hope and pray that all of the people that we advocate for and everyone else who has the virus will recover. In the beginning of this, the prisons where most of the people we were preparing motions for had no cases. There were a few that had cases. Now every single one of those prisons has at least 1 case, and some have hundreds of cases. The first motion we filed was denied, and one of the reasons the judge gave for the denial was that there weren't any cases at that point in USP Marion. My client is in the communications management unit there. And that Judge Rakoff from the Southern District, when he denied it, he said, well, if there are cases in Marion, I can refile. So now there's a lot of cases in Marion. I refiled when there were a few cases, and while that refiled case has been pending, the virus exploded there, so there's over 100 cases there. There haven't been any cases in the CMU itself yet, as far as we know. Of course, there's not always a lot of testing, but the staff do go back and forth sometimes between the places where there are cases and the CMU, and several of the staff are infected. Plus, there's a lot of community infections in that area in Illinois, so there is a high risk of the virus reaching the CMU. And when I filed for one of the other people whose case is pending, that's Rafiq Sabir, and I just want to say Rafiq is a doctor, a medical doctor. He was an ER doctor who was sentenced to 25 years in a sting operation just for agreeing to provide medical care to alleged terrorists. They just got him to say he would agree to provide medical care. And when I filed for him, there were no cases in FCI Loretto where he is. But now, while we're waiting for a decision, there's been over 50 cases there. And Rafiq was just diagnosed with prostate cancer around May 1st, and he has not even gotten a biopsy yet. So he hasn't been able to begin treatment. And he understands what that means as a doctor. Like, this cancer could become lethal when it could have been curable. Another thing that Rafiq said is that when he did go for a medical appointment, not the biopsy, but some other medical appointment, he was quarantined when he came back, which is a usual thing that they do. But during that quarantine period, at one point, they said they had to decontaminate the quarantine area where he was, which makes you wonder what's going on with that. But then he was put in the SHU to finish his quarantine, and he was put in a cell in the SHU with another guy who was in quarantine, who had symptoms, who was coughing a lot. That's really nuts. Luckily, they both tested negative after that, but that could have been a disaster. So the Bureau of Prisons is not handling this pandemic well. They're trying to some extent, but they are really not doing a good job. And we are really hopeful. Well, we're hopeful. We're really wishing and hoping and praying that we can get some more of our people released, and that no more of our people or anyone else dies of COVID in prison.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kathy. We're hopeful. We're really hopeful. Yeah. Just for nearing the end here, I was wondering if anybody has any final comments they'd like to make. Maria, would you like to say anything on our way out here?
Only that I just would like to reiterate what Kathy just said, that they are doing a terrible job of managing who has symptoms, who doesn't have symptoms, who has been exposed, who hasn't been exposed, and keeping people separated on those bases. So just, yeah. So it's
just another off the wall question. Would you say there's anything that just regular people could do to help this situation? Or what would you recommend anything for people that want to take some action?
I mean, I think the Bureau of Prisons has been doing some, not enough, but some transfers to home confinement. The pressure point is on the head of BOP and Attorney General Barr. So
maybe write letters to BOP. Okay. Oh, I like your cat. Okay, thank you very much. Let me go to, let's go. Layla, do you have any closing words? Or
I just want to say that when they put somebody in prison, they are making a lot of money out of them. There's something called the prison industrial complex, whereas, they're making money out of these inmates. A lot of these inmates are innocent, and it's not necessary for them to be in prison. Every time his son calls, he has to pay money. Every time he needs to buy something, he has to pay money. Every time he uses the internet, he needs to pay money. So we have Western Union making money out of him. The phone companies making money out of him. Commissaries making money out of him. Of course, if he needs books, if he needs more soap, anything. So they're making money out of these inmates. So this is one of the reasons they like to keep people in prison. So if somebody did not do anything, somebody's charged that one day in the future, they're going to do something wrong. How does that even make sense? How can they go into somebody's mind and predict that someday in the future he's going to do something wrong?
Yeah.
So they just stole from my son and I 11 years of our time together, They stole that time from him. They stole the time from him of having, kids, getting married and having kids, because he wanted to get married. And just all of this doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah.
We have people who raped, women and children, and who killed people. They're out after 5-10 years, and then we have somebody who didn't touch anyone is serving 31.5 years. So it doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make sense. I agree, and we're hoping for a change. Of course, we're working towards that change as much as we can.
If you wanted to talk about the Ego Relief Act also. No.
Yes, we have maybe Kathy should talk about it since she wrote that bill. Would you like to talk about it, Kathy?
Sure. It hasn't actually been getting too far yet, but nothing's really moving in Congress right now. We're hopeful that after the election, if things take a turn for the better, it might get some traction. But so we drafted this bill to try to take care of many of the problems that have landed these people in prison unfairly. So one is to actually create an entrapment defense, because many of our people are caught in sting operations where they had never tried to do anything before the informant started manipulating them, and they target vulnerable people who they can manipulate and coerce and sometimes offer large sums of money to. Sometimes the targets are mentally ill. So this part of the bill would require that before they can go after somebody in a sting operation, that person already had to be taking substantial steps toward committing this terrorism offense, already had to be not just thinking about it, not just saying, oh, I wish I could do something, but like actually kind of working toward it before they can be convicted then in a sting operation. That otherwise it's entrapment, basically. That's a simplified version of it, but that's one big part of it. Another part is that in order to be convicted of material support for terrorism, they would have to have evidence that the person intended to support violence. Because, I mean, terrorism is supposed to be violent. I mean, that's kind of the idea of it, violence to instill fear in a civilian population. But the law now allows for people to be convicted of material support to terrorism without having any intent to support violence. And if you look at, for example, the Holy Land 5 case, they clearly had no intent to support violence. They were just doing pure charity, not even to a terrorist organization. But so anyway, that's another part of it, to require that evidence of an intent to support violence. And the third part of the EGO bill also sounds like a no-brainer, which is that many of these cases have classified evidence and it's used unfairly against the defendants because their defense attorney is not even able to see the evidence that's given to the judge. So this would require that if classified evidence is given to a judge in one of these cases, the defense attorney, assuming they have a security clearance, and if they don't, they can get somebody on the team who does, they have to be able to see that evidence. That is not the way the law is now. So those three things, they seem pretty fair to me. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to yet get a sponsor for this bill. So that's one of the things we'll be working on when Congress kind of opens back up a little more at some point, and probably after the election, if depending on what happens with the election. There are some other bills that are being looked at. Some are actually drafted and may have sponsors, and some are not, that are more general criminal justice reform bills that would help our people. And also there's a push to get Congress to do more, if they ever pass this new stimulus package, to include some more ways to get people released from federal prison or other kinds of prisons during the pandemic, increase home confinement, have more protections for people in the prison if they are still there, so they're less likely to get the virus. So if you contact us through our Facebook page or email us, you can subscribe to our news digest, and Mel does the news digest every week, and a lot of times we will have information on things you can do to help, to contact Congress or write a letter in support of a prison or whatever it may be. So we hope that people can do that.
And you can subscribe at info@civilfreedoms.org with subscribe in the subject there. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Layla, for that wonderful suggestion. And Ashley, do you have any closing comments?
Well, I just thought it was important to mention that someone like Layla's son would be affected by the EGO bill. What is so tragic in her son's case is that the government couldn't even identify the crime that her son was accused of. Mel read the language that was used against her son. It said a crime in an unknown place at an unknown time. There was one more unknown, which I'm forgetting.
Unknown group.
Unknown crime, I guess.
Place, time, and people.
Yeah.
Supporting.
And so obviously her son's case would fall under definitely the intent part of the EGO bill.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about the case, but maybe possibly secret evidence that's not being turned over to the defense. So the EGO bill is so important for that reason. And, you know, that always struck me as really just heartbreaking about her son's case, is that, that definitely that huge injustice that I just mentioned. It's
it's a very, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's just, I've never heard that language before, and it always,
it's unbelievable.
it is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
So,
the other odd thing, it was a conspiracy, but the other people said, no, he knew nothing about the conspiracy. So the judge said, well, if he's didn't conspire with anybody, then he's a lone wolf. And so he's convicted of a conspiracy with himself, I guess. So none of it made any sense at all. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. some things that people like Layla and I are doing who have loved ones in prison during this incredibly even more difficult time is like the ACLU, for example, has these little petitions on their website. So you go in, you plug in your information, and it sends directly to your senators. And it talks about things about that are happening in the prison. And you're urging, you know, your lawmakers to pay attention to these things. You're asking for certain things that would affect and help the incarcerated population who are being so affected by this virus. So definitely little things like that. Layla and I are also personally writing to our lawmakers, letting them know that we have loved ones in prison. This is what they're going through, and this is why it's important that you please consider them, especially now during this time. And that's something that anyone can do. Everyone has a senator, a congressman. It just takes a few minutes, and of course just building networks and continuing to have conversations like this is something that, you know, the average person like you or me can do.
Thank you, Ashley. And I remind everybody to sign up for our News Digest at info@civilfreedoms.org. And I mentioned this is our 12th webinar. If you missed the first 11, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can see them there, and they're also on Facebook.
And how do they find our YouTube channel?
Coalition for Civil Freedoms.
Or NCPCF, is it? Or
I think it's been changed to Coalition for Civil Freedoms. Yeah, so it's all, yeah, and Facebook, Coalition for Civil Freedoms. So thank you. Okay, and thank you for all participating. I hope to, Maria, I hope to see you again. We just met today for the first time. So thank you very much for joining us here. And until next time.
Thank you.